No other animal on this entire planet has a death so absolutely massive that scientists literally gave it its own special name. It's called a whale fall. And you probably think when these giants die, they just sink to the ocean floor and disappear forever. But what really goes down is basically the equivalent of a meat meteor slamming into the deep sea, an entire buffet falling from the sky. When whales die, they don't just die, and that's it. They go through multiple different phases, with each phase lasting anywhere from days to literal months before the whale is actually gone for good. These events are so incredibly important that entire species completely rely on whale falls happening. If whale falls suddenly stopped, these species would straight up go extinct. But to understand why this matters so much, we need to talk about how these absolute units even die in the first place. Welcome to Ocean Depths, and let us break it down for you. Whales are literally the biggest animals in the world, so enormous that they basically don't have any real predators. Well, except one, but we're not talking about that right now. Since nothing really hunts them, most whales die the way ancient giants do, slowly from getting old, getting sick, or just pure exhaustion. And honestly, this might be the most heartbreaking death in the entire ocean. Here's the thing about whales, they're mammals just like us. Unlike fish, they can't breathe underwater. They have to come up to the surface for air. Every few minutes, even the absolute biggest whales have to push their multi-ton bodies all the way up from the deep ocean just to take one breath. And when you weigh over 200,000 pounds, that's incredibly difficult. When whales are young, it's easy. They blast upwards with the power of a freight train and can literally launch themselves out of the water. But as they get older, that same trip becomes absolute torture. Their muscles get weaker. Their body fat shifts around. The effort it takes to fight gravity and water pressure just to reach the surface gets harder and harder until one day it becomes completely impossible. When they get too old and too exhausted, their bodies are just too heavy for them to lift anymore. It's honestly brutal and kind of tragic that the same massive size that made them unstoppable is what eventually kills them. But I guess that's just how the ocean works. What it gives, it takes away. When this happens, we're at the beginning of what scientists call a whale fall. But interestingly, the actual falling part doesn't start immediately. The whale first enters something called the floating stage. Stage 1, the floating stage. During the floating stage, the whale's enormous body floats at the ocean surface. When a whale dies, gases inside its body turn it into a giant inflated island of dead flesh. It can stay floating like this for days, sometimes even weeks, slowly drifting across the ocean like the world's most disturbing life raft. But wait, you're probably wondering, if they float when they're dead, how did they die from drowning in the first place? Great question. When a whale is alive, it's not naturally buoyant. It's super dense, all muscle, bone, and thick blubber. It has to actively swim to stay near the surface. But when it dies, bacteria inside starts breaking down its tissue, releasing gases like methane, carbon dioxide, and hydrogen sulfide. This literally inflates the body from the inside like a massive balloon. Obviously, they can't do this while they're alive. What if the whale drowned instead? Okay, so here's where things get really interesting. If a whale drowned instead of dying at the surface, everything would be completely different. If a whale becomes too tired to surface and drowns, it doesn't go through the floating stage at all. Without reaching the surface to build up all those gases, the body stays heavy and immediately starts sinking. The body would begin falling right away, dropping through the water while it's still pretty fresh. This means way less feeding happens at the surface because sharks and seabirds never get their turn at the buffet. For deep sea creatures, a drowned whale that immediately sinks is basically winning the lottery and then winning it again. Back to normal process. While the whale floats at the surface, the first feeding event kicks off. Sharks, seabirds, and sometimes even other whales start destroying it while it drifts. They tear off massive chunks of blubber and meat that can feed entire ecosystems. But eventually this giant meat balloon starts to deflate. All those gases escape, and the whale's body loses its ability to float. The ocean starts taking it back slowly, piece by piece. Then the body suddenly starts dropping. This brings us to the actual whale fall. Stage 2, the drop. When the whale begins falling toward the ocean floor, it takes a decent amount of time, usually several hours depending on how big the whale is and how deep the ocean is. If the ocean is roughly 10,000 feet deep and the whale falls at about 100 feet per minute, it would take around an hour and 40 minutes to hit the bottom. Imagine you're a deep-sea fish just vibing in the darkness, and you suddenly see the biggest object you've ever witnessed in your entire life slowly crashing toward the seafloor like a biological asteroid. That's legitimately what this looks like. Stage 3, the feeding frenzy. When the whale finally hits the seafloor, stage 3 starts, the scavenger stage. This is honestly one of the most disgusting stages, but some people might think it's beautiful in a weird way. Within literal hours of landing, every deep-sea scavenger in the area shows up. Hagfish, sleeper sharks, crabs, amphipods, all of them absolutely tearing into the whale like it's Black Friday at the mall. These scavengers can strip hundreds of pounds of flesh in just one day. Over the next few months to years, they'll eat up to 90% of the whale's entire body. What gets left behind are bones, connective tissue, and oily gross stuff seeping into the surrounding sand. The deep sea doesn't exactly have tons of food lying around everywhere. So finding something like this is literally like winning the mega lottery for deep sea creatures. A massive, meaty lottery. If you could watch this happen, you'd see hagfish slithering through the body, sleeper sharks ripping off enormous chunks, and literally thousands of crabs swarming over every single surface. It's absolute chaos. A feeding party that can last for months. Stage 4, the small stuff takes over. After the big scavengers finish eating their fill, what's left enters the next stage, the enrichment opportunist stage. Now the smaller creatures move in. Worms, crustaceans, and bacterial mats start thriving on whatever the large scavengers left behind. They dig into the sand around the bones, eating the oily residue and rotting tissue buried deep in the seafloor. I know this sounds absolutely disgusting. That's because it genuinely is. If this was happening at the surface where we could smell it, it would be unbearable. Thousands of pounds of rotting meat, decomposing fats, sulfur, and ammonia from bacteria, creating that classic rotten egg smell mixed with dead fish stench. It would be genuinely horrific. This stage goes on for years, sometimes literal decades, as the whale's remains slowly change the surrounding environment. What started as one dead whale becomes an entire working ecosystem, a thriving living community in the middle of an otherwise completely empty void. Some creatures that show up on these sunken whale bodies are so specialized they literally cannot survive anywhere else on Earth. The most famous are bone-eating worms called osedacs. They don't even have mouths or stomachs. Instead, they use root-like structures filled with bacteria to digest the fats inside the bones. Next to them are bizarre clams, mussels, and amphipods that feed on the chemical soup leaking from the whale's remains. Many of these species are only found on whale falls. Entire life forms that owe their complete existence to the death of something way bigger than them. Stage 5, the bone eaters. Just when it seems like there's absolutely nothing left to take from this poor whale, life finds yet another way to feed on it. At this point, all the whale's flesh is completely gone. Only bones remain, but those bones are packed with fats, and deep-sea bacteria know exactly how to use that as fuel. Specialized microbes start breaking down the fats inside the bones, releasing hydrogen sulfide. This is a gas that's straight up toxic to most animals, but acts as energy for whatever wild creatures evolution created in the deep. Giant tube worms, mussels, and clams show up, living off the bacteria that feed on the whale's bones. It's basically a mini hydrothermal vent ecosystem, except it's not powered by underground magma or sunlight, just the absolutely enormous dead body of a whale. This stage can last literal decades, even up to a full century. A whale that died over 100 years ago can still be supporting new life right now, basically turning one massive animal into thousands of smaller ones. It's kind of beautiful in a weird way, but also wildly disgusting. Honestly, not sure how to feel about it, but that's just how nature works in the ocean. What happens after everything? Eventually, even with the whale's insane size, the bones break down. The sulfides disappear. The bacteria die off. What's left of the whale is just a fragile skeleton, cleaned out, hollow, and buried deep in the sand. But this still isn't the actual end. Over time, corals, sponges, and sea anemones start growing on the leftover bone structures. The once rotting body turns into basically a deep-sea reef. Tiny fish and invertebrates move in, hiding among the ribs and spine like it's ancient ruins. They're not feeding on the whale anymore. They're using its body one final time for literal housing. The whale becomes a reef. This can last almost a century until all the whale's atoms are fully spread throughout the ocean. How often does this even happen? So how often are these ecosystem-creating events actually happening? Interestingly, whale falls were way more common for a brief period in history. During the peak of industrial whaling in the 1800s and 1900s, thousands of whales were killed every single year. Many of their bodies or body parts got dumped back into the ocean after being cut up for oil and blubber. Every single one of those deaths, whether natural or not, sent a wave through the ocean. One whale fall can support an entire ecosystem for decades. So every whale that died was both a tragedy and a gift to the deep sea. Whalers were literally throwing whole ecosystems to the ocean floor. In a messed up way, the whaling industry actually fed life in the deep sea, even as it destroyed whale populations at the surface. But obviously this couldn't go on forever. When more whales die than are born, there are fewer whales left to make more whales. Eventually, some whale species were pushed almost to extinction, and their numbers are still low today. A massive increase in whale falls creates a massive boost in deep-sea life. But then when there's suddenly a huge drop in whale falls, all that life has nothing left to eat. Creating and then destroying entire ecosystems can really screw up the ocean's balance. Other ways whales die. Besides natural deaths, whale falls can also happen from ship strikes, killer whale attacks, or beaching events where the body eventually floats back to sea. Ship strikes are brutal. A ship accidentally hitting a whale near the surface can kill it instantly. Even though whales weigh hundreds of thousands of pounds, ships weigh tens of millions of pounds. The metal hull smashing into a whale is definitely enough to kill one, causing accidental whale falls. Killer whales also contribute. In groups, they can take down adult whales but usually go after babies instead. But as part of nature's normal cycle, they're not really a threat to whale extinction. Beaching events can also create whale falls, which is honestly counterintuitive. You wouldn't think a beached whale would sink since it's literally on land. But when whales get stranded, whether they're sick, confused by sonar, or following another whale too close to shore, they get stuck. Their own weight crushes their internal organs, and the sun literally cooks the body from the outside in. As the body breaks down, gases build up inside, inflating the whale normally, but on land. If the whale is near the water or there's a rising tide, the trapped gas can make it float again. Then it gets pulled back to sea and enters the whale fall process. This is actually how those exploding whale videos happen. If the body isn't moved fast, gases keep building, and the pressure keeps rising until the skin stretches super tight and eventually explodes. That's where you get those wild stories of whales randomly exploding. All the trapped methane, sulfur, and decay fluids blast outward in one disgusting explosion. In the end, it doesn't matter how the whale dies. Any large whale that dies and sinks becomes an instant ecosystem for the deep sea. We don't actually know how many whales are down there creating new ecosystems because there's way too much ocean floor to explore. It could be hundreds or thousands. But based on how many whales die each year, the deep ocean is probably covered with these ready-made cities of life. Ironically, the most alive places at the bottom of the ocean are exactly where something died. Whether this is beautiful, disgusting, or somehow both, no other creature on this planet besides whales has such an enormous impact after death. Their final gift to the ocean is becoming the foundation for entire communities of life that literally couldn't exist without them. If this whole whale death journey was as wild for you as it was for us, press that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to Ocean Depths because trust me, we've got way more insane ocean content coming. What should we explore next? Drop your ideas below and let's keep diving deeper.